Today I'm going to study OpenGL context. I'm trying to solve a problem that I'm having, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to solve it today, but I'm going to spend a bunch of time studying the OpenGL context to understand how it works. So basically the problem that I'm having is whenever I include the GLAD library, I think that's the problem. That's the thing I don't know for sure. But I spent a bunch of time trying to simplify these things here, the functions from 3PP. And now it seems that it's working here, but the issue is that if I uncomment this stuff, I did some tests like that to try to figure out. This is one thing that is kind of concerning me, is that I don't have a good way still to debug things, because the error that I was getting is segmentation faults, and I don't know really well how to go about solving these errors. So the way that I'm solving now, uh, obviously I haven't encountered that many errors because I don't have a lot of experience building. But so far, from the errors that I've encountered, the way that I solve is just by thinking about what can be the issue, and then just testing a bunch of different things to see if if that can be the actual issue or not. So the way that I did here was just to comment this stuff out, and then I did some tests, and it seems like whenever I put the GLAD library, because there's a program class that I'm using that has to use the GLAD library, because I'm building a bunch of functions that are going to build buffers that are going to communicate with OpenGL, and when I put that, it fails. And then I'm going to go over with the GDB thing, and it's going to show segmentation faults. And I think that the reason might be because I was getting other errors as well before this error. And the error that I was getting is that I didn't realize that I was, which is something that I really hate, to be honest. But you have to include GLAD. Whenever you're gonna use GLAD, you have to include it before you include GLFW. And I don't understand very well why. And it's really annoying. But yeah, it is what it is. So the error that I was getting is because I had this library here, and then it took me a long time to figure out, because I knew that I had to put the GLAD thing before, but because I was including GLAD on the programs file, and I created this other file here to make it easier to import the whole library on the project that I'm going to use. And there's also stuff related to CMake, which makes it a lot more complicated to understand what's going on. That's kind of the problem. So I had to do try a bunch of different stuff, and yeah, but pretty much I realized at some point that the problem was that because I'm including GLAD on this one and I'm including here, after I include this, it doesn't work. So I just moved and then it worked. Let me go over with the GDB first, then I'm going to show what happens when I try to compile with the graphics after this thing here. So if I run, it's going to give segmentation faults. The best way to try to figure out what these problems are, I think, is just setting up VS Code. But I want to see if I can find something better. But the concern that I have is that it might take a lot of time to figure out like how to actually go about, because probably you have to create some function or something like that, and then you have to put the functions to print stuff. So it's gonna be kind of annoying. But when I put the graphics here, it's just gonna give an error again. It shows this thing here that comes from the GLH library. And then like one solution that I found, that it seems that it was working at some point and then out of nowhere it stopped working. I'm not really sure why, but it is a hacky solution. It's just to put this stuff here whenever you import GLAD, and then you just put if and def. So if this is not defined, then it imports. If not, then it doesn't. And that seemed to work for some time, and it allowed me to include or to use the OpenGL functions. But at some point it stopped working. I'm not really sure why. So this is what I'm trying to solve. Maybe before I start studying OpenGL, I should talk about the stuff that I did here. There was one thing that I want to say as well. So the way that I'm working, the way that I'm doing this is just creating this library. I'm putting this folder inside of this libs folder. And my plan is to just put libraries that I'm gonna create and manage inside of these libs here. And then I'm creating another C file. The other annoying thing is the shaders here, that I'm not really sure. Because for now, based on the tests that I did, I think that the error might be on GLAD, but it might be a lot of other things because it's a segmentation file. That's kind of the issue. But for the shaders, I just found this stuff here, and it pretty much copies the files that you put. So from what I've seen, it's recommended to put this stuff on assets folder, and then create another folder to place the shaders, because here later on I might want to put models or things like that, which are things that allows you, like when you use other software, you can create a model, which is the data that's going to create the thing. And there's other stuff you can put here, but pretty much the way that I've seen is just creating some command on CMake that is just going to copy the assets file to the location on the build folder, and then you just use the relative path from the build folder, I think, to specify which shader you're going to use, which I'm doing here. When I create this program class, I just put this function, and I'm passing this file path from the programs class. Fuck. Hey, what's up? Which from this path here, which is the relative path for the shaders that I got, which is very simplified shaders from 3JS. And one thing that occurred to me is that there might be a problem because of the way that I'm structuring the shaders, but I'm not really sure. I think you should be glad, so I'm gonna try to figure out. So the way that I think it works with OpenGL is that you don't have access to the actual code, and I think it's because it's not really open source. I don't understand very well how it works, but I think that you don't have access to the OpenGL code. You just have access to pointers to functions. So you have to specify at some point where, because you can only figure this out on runtime and not on compile time. So this is what the libraries do, the GL and the other libraries. They just provide a bunch of function pointers that are going to work as an interface between you and OpenGL. And so you actually don't have access to the source code from OpenGL. So the problem seems to be, I'm not really sure, that's what I'm trying to figure out, but I think that the problem is that GLFW initializes OpenGL with one context, which is one of GL libraries. And then because of that, you can't initialize with the other ones, because then there are conflicts between macros and other stuff on the way that you should communicate with OpenGL. But, and this is the thing, that there might be several different solutions. Like one of the solutions that I thought is obviously to just use, like why not just include the same file from GLFW on the actual thing that I'm gonna use, because then I'm using the same functions. But I think that is probably not the best solution. So from other stuff that I've seen, they say that it doesn't matter, and you can use other files as long as you put the GLAD first, which is something that I don't understand, and it seems very bad to me, to be honest. So trying to figure out what is the best way to go about this. And then I remember that ImGui creates the connection between GLFW and ImGui, obviously. So they provide some functions, and then I was trying to understand, and this is what I'm going to be doing now, I think, just going over the source code. So they provide some functions that connect with GLFW, and I want to understand how and why. So as far as I've seen so far, it seems that they create their custom loader, and then there's some stuff on the documentation there, on the comments, that they say that you can use your own stuff, your own file to load OpenGL functions. You don't have to use the custom loader that they use, because the custom loader is not the complete thing. They just put a couple of functions from OpenGL, only the ones that they're gonna use. But I don't understand this whole thing and how the OpenGL context really works. So I'm probably gonna use ChatGPT as well and try to find some articles, I think. But another thing that I thought that it might be wrong is the shaders. Because on this shader here, I'm declaring this this is another very difficult thing that I was trying to figure out. And for now, it seems that it worked because it compiles, but I'm not really sure now, this problem. But it's the next thing that I'm going to try to figure out after I figure it out. Is how to set the uniforms. Because each uniform is going to have a different type. And then they have all their different functions. And then if the size of the uniform is greater than 1, and I'm not really sure what it means by size, but if it is greater than 1, then you should send a vector. So I think there's two different ways to set uniforms. One is to set with a array of data, a vector of data, and the other one is just pass a single value. And the vector seems to be more efficient if you want to render a bunch of things, because but it's still kind of confusing to me. So in the vertex shader, you're supposed to send a vector. So I'm not really sure how this connection, maybe I should write it down as well. So this is another part that was always confusing to me, because you send a data, you send an array of vectors to the, you send a vector to the vector of floats to the vertex shader, and then it accepts one point at a time. So I don't know very well how this transition works from the, as far as I understand now, the way that it works is just you're sending one, you set up the buffer with the vector, then you tell OpenGL how to feed or how to get data from the buffer based on the functions that you call from OpenGL, and then based on that, it's gonna take at runtime 1 point at a time, because you're telling the buffer, you're telling OpenGL how it should get the data from the buffer. It's just 1 point at a time, and then from that part is gonna send 1 point at a time to the fragment shader as well. So the fragment shader is just gonna color 1 point at a time. But then because of this, the way that you set these uniforms, it seems like it's also possible for you to set not only one value for the uniform, but a vector of values as well. And that's the main difference you have. And then depending which, but I guess it's the same thing, because it's just OpenGL functions you're calling to determine how OpenGL is gonna read the data you're sending to OpenGL. But I think that's for the stuff that I'm gonna do. At least from the code that it has there, it doesn't seem like at any point I might be wrong, because the uniform part is very confusing, but it seems like they are setting one stuff at a time. And I didn't get to the point where I'm gonna set the uniforms from the material. I'm just trying to make the main loop work and set the uniforms that are related to the camera view matrix and the projection matrix. But because of that, it's very annoying the way you have to set everything up. So you can create a class that is going to manage how from the other classes you're going to send the data to those classes, so that they call OpenGL functions to structure everything. So one reason that I think it might give segmentation faults, because I'm setting these values on the shader here, but I'm not passing any data to them. So I'm not really sure what happens in this case. I assume that the GLF frag color is going to be undefined or something like that. But I think that if that's the case, it should send probably, you should put a color to it, I think, a default color or whatever. But I'm going to ask this to ChatGPT, and obviously I'm going to put some default colors here to test. But the way that they do it on this other project here, which is the reason why I was trying to change, because it seems very confusing to me. And the reason, like, it has to be somewhat confusing because of the way C++ works, which is another annoying thing, but I think that is more confusing than it has to be. That's the problem. But at some points I thought that, and maybe I'm still gonna do that, like, it's not worth it to spend a bunch of time trying to figure this out, so I should just use this thing here. But this is it's connected with a bunch of other things, and that's the kind of the problem. Because if I want to use this, I have to include a bunch of other libraries and change some things. So the way that they are doing here is they create general classes to manage the attributes and uniforms, and then the programs class is related to the program class. So it creates a map or a mapping or a vector for the programs. So it's like caching the programs, and then you have more generic classes that manage all the uniforms and the attributes between different programs. And the way that I think it makes more sense to do is just to have a mapping on the programs class, which I'm making based on a static variable. The static variable, it doesn't change after you initialize the program. It's going to remain the same throughout the entire execution. So I'm using that to cache the ID to this program count here. This is like I got from the other one, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to change this. Like I don't know if the ID here is necessary because they were doing things a different way. But yeah, so the way that I'm doing that now, the way that I'm thinking about doing is just creating this cache here between these IDs. So every time I create a program, I'm going to map to this program class, which is a shared pointer. So it's just a pointer to the actual program. And the program class is the thing that is going to manage everything related to that program. And it's going to save an instance of the mesh that I pass on the initialization. So I think that this way makes a lot more sense, but I might be wrong because of this other stuff. And there's other thing that I learned as well, that you can have this uniform buffer objects, which is a generic buffer that once you set up, you can set uniforms for different programs at the same time. So it seems that it's more efficient, but it's a lot more complicated. And I don't think I'm gonna use this for now because it's gonna be very annoying. I think I'm gonna try to make it work with the simplest way possible first. But because of these differences in the way that I'm doing the design, then in my case, it makes a lot more sense, I think, to just create a generic function that accepts a generic type, a template type. And then from that template type, there's another function, which is very similar in the way that they were doing, that has a switch statement, which is this one. And then based on the type you receive, you call different functions that are gonna... I was thinking about calling the functions directly. And these functions are gonna call the OpenGL thing, OpenGL function to set the value. And before you do that, you have to cache all the locations of the uniforms. And the way you do that is by calling another function that's another OpenGL function and then storing everything to a struct. And here they are also caching. I'm not really sure why they are doing this. I didn't spend a bunch of time. And I was just trying to simplify as much as possible. But apparently they are using two vectors to cache here. Don't understand how this works very well every time. But removing the cache, the thing that happens is that they are calling different functions for setting different uniforms depending on the type of the uniform. So they call a set value function, and then they pass the name of the uniform and the new value that is going to replace the value inside the actual shader. And then they have another function that is a regex function that is going to determine what kind of... So pretty much they call this function here to get the uniforms, and then this creates a cache, which is based on this other class here. So that's the main difference, I think, from the way that they are doing it, the way that I'm trying to do. So because this is just a one-on-one, like it's just 3GS ported to C++. So it's not like they... I think that's not like they thought about doing it. They were just trying to transfer 3GS. So that's the way 3GS does it. They create these classes, and then from the classes, they create the programs. So like they have generic classes that handle the variables for multiple programs. And I'm thinking about doing the other way, where I have a program, and then I have the classes that handle the stuff related to that program, because I think that makes it easier. But the thing that I'm not really sure is that it might be... The reason that, why they are doing this way is because it might be better, because one of the examples could be this thing here. Like this kind of forces you to have a more generic function. But the way that I'm thinking about going with this, if I'm going to use this, is to just put this function on the programs class instead. And I can have some functionality that go over... So I think that's going to be better, to be honest, if I'm able to do it. But at the first time, they don't have anything, and they cache all the uniforms on this variable here, cache the uniforms. It's going to be a pointer to this class. And this class here has this container class, and this container class is going to store this uniform object, which is this struct. Or they're both structs, but are pretty much the same thing. And these are so they store both on a vector and on another map. And I didn't spend a bunch of time trying to understand as well, but because it's kind of annoying, and I'm just trying to make it work with the simplest thing possible. But yeah, so they create these things to cache the uniforms. That's great. Oh, let me. So when this is on the constructor of this class, is gonna call this function here from OpenGL, and this is the function that is gonna get all the uniform values. Then they go over all the uniform values. They create this other struct here, and this struct is gonna be used to cache the information from the uniform. The name, the type, the size, and the location. I think the location is here. Don't remember really well. Then they call this parse uniforms, and then on the sparse uniforms there is some regex. I assume what they're doing is just parsing the name of the variables on the shader here. So for example, this one. So when you call that function from OpenGL, it probably comes as a string that has the type and the name, I assume. I'm not really sure. And what they're doing there is just breaking this down based on some regex pattern, and then based on what kind of declaration it is for the variable, they're gonna, inside of this loop here, they're gonna create different types of classes here, which are the shared pointers. So this handles a single uniform, which is the case that I was talking about if you want to set only one value. And the pre-array uniforms is like a vector. And I assume that's the case because of the types. I'm not really sure if that's the case or not. And this one, I'm not really sure how this one works yet. That's the one that I didn't spend up too much time looking into. So this is one of the main concerns that I have as well, is that after I have more experience setting or creating uniforms and shader variables, I'm gonna have to change a bunch of stuff because of the way you have to do it to set these variables. So these classes are these ones on this file, and on the initialization here, the set value function, which is going to be the generic function from the parent class. I think it's this one that is going to be used to set things inside of the rendering cycle for all of them. So this is one thing that I kind of didn't like as well, because it's just one. It makes it very confusing to understand what's going on. That's the biggest problem that I have. So what I was trying to do is to simplify these functions, and I tried a bunch of times and a bunch of things to, like, instead of putting this value here, I wasn't returning a function, just returning void, and then just trying to set the values. But the issue is, because of the way C++ works, I think it kind of forces you. So I understand why they did this way. It kind of forces you to do things in a similar way that the way that they did, but I did it in a slightly different way. Well, first let me explain the way that they did it. So they based on the switch statement here, like, these are gonna be variables that OpenGL, because this is a struct that was that they got once they cached the uniforms, based on the function where they loop over all the active uniforms and they cache that on the struct. They're gonna cache the type as well of the variable based on the regex thing, and then based on that, it's gonna return this hex, and this hex is gonna be what kind of type they are, what kind of type of the variable. And then based on that, they're gonna call different functions. And the reason why is because of the type. So these functions here, they are calling this to cast, I think, the value into the type that the function requires. But this function doesn't require floats necessarily, it requires GL float. But this seems to work, even if you put as floats. So I'm not really sure if it would be better to do something else. But I think that's kind of the thing, is like C++ forces you to do things this way, kind of, because of the way that the types work and the way that the compiler is gonna figure everything else. So I think that's the reason why they did it like this. And then here, yeah, whenever you have this array, you have to put this template because of the way that the type works, because you don't know what kind of value you're going to receive on the main function. That's the problem. So on this function here, you don't know what kind of value, this value is going to be. So like this returns this lambda here because the way that initializes the class. So it's pretty much like setting the value at this set value function as this lambda here. So it's just going to replace the lambda. That's the reason why it's returning the function, not calling a function, because you're just going to do this in practice when you're calling the function from outside on the main rendering cycle. And then because you don't know what this value is going to be, then you create this thing here. And then because of this value can be many other things, you have to structure in this way where you're using templates to figure out what kind of... He's actually using a variant, now that I remember. And the way that a variant works is just a C++, or just a standard function that allows you to put many different types on a variable. And then the compiler is going to figure out what kind of type the variable is. So it's just allowing to put... It's kind of like it's the same logic as an enum, but for different variables, I think. So yeah, that's what the value variable is going to be there. It's going to be this standard variant. And then because it's a standard variant, in some cases, you're going to have to do this thing here, which is use this std visit function. And as far as I understand now, and there's some stuff that he did here because of compiler versions or something like that, but pretty much the way that it works is that it allows you to set... It's kind of like the... I think an easy way to think about it is that as if the std visit is looping over the std variant types and figuring out which kind of type the value is going to be. And then based on which kind of type the value is going to be, it's going to call one of these functions here that he puts inside of this overloader. So that's what he is doing here. But it becomes very confusing to figure out. And then because you specify the type explicitly here inside of the lambda function, then what happens is that it works. And there is the conversion, even if the type, because the value is a template type. So if you try to pass the value directly to the function, it doesn't work because it's not going to be able to, even if you use, I think, static cast. I don't remember if I tried to use it or not. Because one way you can think about it is instead of doing this pattern here, I'm just going to call the function directly, like whatever functionality I have here, which is the thing that I was trying to do. But then it doesn't work because of the type. And even if you try to convert, because there are some examples there where you have this std get, even if you try to do this to get the type, or do dynamic cast or static cast, still doesn't work. So I think you have to do this visit here. And then there's this more confusing thing, which is this is a struct which uses a variadic template, which is a template that allows you to pass an arbitrary number of values. And that's like one of the reasons why I didn't really like this thing here. Like the whole way that you have to do this, it feels very confusing to me. So I'm trying to simplify as much as possible. So basically, when you initialize, the values are going to be this thing here, which is, and this overloaded is this struct here. So based on what ChatGPT told me, I think that's what this, all of that this allows you to do is allow the type, or whatever type it is, to use this, to overload this operator, or to use the operator function on the type. It's something like that, I don't remember very well. But then one way that I was trying to do it is, instead of having these generic functions, which is another thing that ChatGPT recommended, you just create one function, and then based on the function you create, you put a bunch of, you create a generic function with a template, and then you declare that function multiple different times with each specific type instead. So instead of doing like this, I would have like function void set uniform. The thing is, I don't remember the syntax very well. It's something like that. And then you have I don't remember the nuances of the thing very well. Or something like this, and then the other instances you just do the template, and then you put the same name, but then you specify which type here it is gonna be, like vector true or something like that. And I think in some situations this might work, but I tried this and it wasn't working for some reason. So in this way, I would always be able to call this function, and then C++ would figure out what kind of type the uniform is by whatever you would find the one that is the closest to the type of the variable, and then call that function. And then I just tried to copy all the functionality here, all these different functions from OpenGL to do it, but it wasn't working. So either I'm gonna have to go with this approach here and just copy all the files, which I want to avoid doing, or I'm going to try to do it the way that I'm doing now, which is just to specify the functions one by one, which I think is a lot simpler. So the way that I'm getting the uniforms is pretty much the same thing, but I'm caching only on a map. So if the map is empty, I call the same functions, and then I'm storing everything on this struct here. So call this function to get the information for the uniform, and then store each thing on its variable inside of the struct. Then call this other function to get the location. And you use the location to tell OpenGL, whenever you want to set the uniform, you have to specify the location that the variable is at inside of the shader, so you can replace the value of the variable, with the value you're sending. Hey, what's up? And then the way that I'm doing now is just I'm gonna do it like this first, because first I wanna solve the GLAD stuff, but if the GLAD thing works, then what I'm gonna do is just probably, I'm not really sure if I think I'm not gonna put on another file, but I'm just gonna specify the functions one by one. And you see, like it compiled, is the first solution that compiled, which is similar to the other approach, but yeah, so that's the way that I'm gonna try to do it, just specify function by function. And then I only specify these three because it seems that the types that I have there on the main cycle are gonna be the matrix 3, matrix 4, and the matrix 4 pointer, which are the variables used on the main loop to set the camera, the projection, and stuff like that. So I want to try to make it happen with the simplest version possible. And after I do that, the next thing to do is to figure out the materials. So the way that they do it, I think the way that I'm going to do is just look at the properties that I have on the material classes. And then based on that, I'm going to create several different functions that set the values. So I think because I don't have a lot of stuff there on the shaders, because I'm trying to simplify, the way that I'm going to do it is just by creating a function that is going to check to see all these values that the class can potentially have, and then if the class has, it just calls the respective uniform or set uniform function that I set up there to set the uniform value. And I think that from the other project, it seems that you have to set each cycle. you have to set the value of the uniform each cycle. You can't set only once in the beginning, which is what I'm doing so far for some parts. Because there is some parts, and this is kind of another confusing thing about OpenGL, is that some parts you have to set up before the rendering cycle, like the buffers and everything. Especially the buffers is the most confusing thing. Then there are other parts that you have to call constantly on, like you have to call each time on the render inside of the render cycle. Oh, happy birthday. The other thing that makes this difficult is that the way that I'm doing with CMake just to create this. I'm creating with the add library thing. This is another thing that I wasn't sure, like if this was the problem or not. So I try a bunch of different stuff here, because it might be the problem. It might not be the OpenGL context. It might be because of the way that I'm doing here. So because I'm creating the library, I'm not really sure how it works on the building process because of the way that, and this is the kind of the thing that's confusing that I'm trying to figure out, is like, because I don't know what's happening really well on the sequence of build steps of the thing. I think what is happening is that first it builds the library, and then after that it links the library with the main project, which is this one. So in my mind, it should make sense that obviously it's going to depend on the import here, but it should be the case that if I put here first, it should be including GLAD first and then GLFW. So like, I'm not really sure why it's not working. And I think it has to be because of GLAD, because it only fails if I include GLAD. If I include all the other files that I have and I just comment out all the program related files, which are the files that are using OpenGL functions, then it also works. So it has to be GLAD. I think it makes sense. So I want to understand why though. And I think that intuitively the thing that makes most sense is that the reason why is because GLFW is creating a context. So every time you use OpenGL, you communicate with Windows, and then that creates a context, which is gonna allow you to have access to the API, which is the functions from OpenGL that are gonna call the functionality on the current OpenGL context. So what I think is happening is that when I create the other library and I use GLAD, I'm creating a different context, and then I'm setting the functions with that context. And then because of that, it gives a segmentation fault, because when it tries to do the functionality that the function is supposed to do, the OpenGL function, I don't have the definitions because the definitions are set by GLFW. I think that's what's happening. But the thing that is kind of annoying and concerning is that that might not be the case, and it might be something else. And because the project is very complex, I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time figuring out like why I'm getting the segmentation faults. So now finally, I'm gonna go over the functions from ImGui. I already looked a little bit into it. So this is kind of the thing as well, is because there probably is several different ways to solve this. So I'm not really sure what to do. I think the easiest way is probably gonna be to just copy whatever ImGui did to create a custom OpenGL context loader, and then just try to add whatever it is I'm gonna need. But that feels like the reason why I'm not implementing this already is because I think that it might be, I want to understand more exactly why the problem is happening. That's the thing. Because it makes a lot more sense, obviously, to use GLH, which already has all the functions. So like, they already did all the work. So for me to use, because the way that they did ImGui is just to do a very simplified version. because of this thing that they were getting a bunch of problems with people trying to use. Initially, they didn't have that. Maybe I should show the. They have some stuff on the comments that explain. They have some links to the issues that explain why they did it. But pretty much the version that they have of the context doesn't have all the OpenGL functions. It's just a little some of them. I'm from Brazil. So it seems that this is how it's supposed to work, but I don't understand very well, obviously. So I have this. You assign a bunch of function pointers here, and then this is the thing that I want to understand. I think this is the name that they give, but it should probably be a standard. And I think it's like how, sure. I think this comes from Windows as well. I think this function is from Windows and it just does, but I'm not really sure what. Maybe we should just look it up. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I think it might be, like, it must be based on the name that figures out. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. But like, yeah, they're defining the standard call as this, and then based on this, they're calling the other thing. So I think that the name probably matters. The name you have to put on the function, because that's how OpenGL probably gonna know what kind of function it is. But the question is why though? Like, why am I getting the error if I have access to the functions and it's compiling? I think 2 years. I don't have a lot of experience with C++. I just did some Code Academy thing 2 years ago. The lectures, and then I read a bunch of books and watched a bunch of videos, but I haven't built anything with C++. I think this is the first thing. Yeah, it's probably the first thing that I'm building with C++. And so far, I pretty much just copy everything from. I didn't copy actually, to be honest, but I didn't start from zero. I just got from the other project, and then I just tried to simplify it as much as possible from the other project. I think that these names here matter, but I'm not really sure how to go about. I think I searched this, but I couldn't find anything. Let me explain before I start searching for this stuff. I didn't look too much into the ImGui stuff. The reason why I'm thinking about doing the ImGui route is because it seems to be like easier, and like it's gonna allow me to learn more, and I'm gonna have more control, I think, because they call a bunch of Windows API functions. So, and this way here is like, it seems that it's gonna be very hard to know what exactly is going on. The other thing that I don't like very much is that the main reason for using OpenGL, I think, is because from what I remember is open source, but it seems like I was wrong and it's not really open source, because you can't have access to the actual functionality of the functions, which kind of sucks, to be honest. And if that's the case, like if you're sad with not being able to know, then I think it's probably better to try to use Vulkan instead, because Vulkan seems to be the more advanced version of OpenGL. But then everyone says that Vulkan is more complicated, so maybe it's better to start with OpenGL anyway. So. So it's just the next turn. So let me go over. I think I'm gonna spend a bunch of time trying to. The thing is, I'm not really sure. I have to think about what is the best way to go about this. The one approach is to get ImGui stuff, incorporates on my own thing, and adds a bunch. Not a bunch, but missing functions that I'm going to use. The other is to understand LADs. I think there's another problem with this other approach here is that I'm not really sure, and this is kind of the issue. I'm kind of guessing that the issue is the GLAD thing. I don't know for sure. That's the problem. And it's concerning because the issue is that if it isn't really the problem, then obviously I'm going to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out, and like I'm going to be looking at the wrong thing, and like maybe it works fine, but it's something along the code. So if I go this route, I probably should answer. I probably should try to do more things to see if the error is really GLAD or something else. But I have a somewhat high confidence that it is GLAD, because otherwise why would the other files be compiling and running? So it wouldn't make sense. But the only thing that is not running is stuff related to the program class itself, which is the only thing that uses the GLAD functions, the OpenGL functions. But the thing is that like that's kind of like a big part as well of the thing, because I simplified a lot from the way that it was. Also because I'm probably not gonna need as many things that they provide on 3JS. But the way that I'm doing here on the render now, I just call the render function. It's pretty much the same way that it was for 3JS. But then I removed a bunch of different functions, and I just left the stuff that I think I'm gonna need. So here, calling this function to update the matrix world from the scene, which is an object 3D, which is gonna traverse the tree and update the matrix for the world. I think it multiplies the local coordinates with the world ones. Yeah. So the matrix. This variable holds the local coordinates for the object, and then it multiplies based on the parent's world coordinates. So just updating the local coordinates, I think, for the object, and for all the children of the object, because it's a tree. The scene is a tree that contains the meshes. And then it updates the camera. And then I call this function is pretty much the project objects, but then I just removed a bunch of stuff. And I have this flag variable here because the way that I'm thinking about doing is just like you call this function only once, and then this function sets all the programs. And then once that happens, you obviously don't need to call it anymore. And then inside of this loop here, because I'm storing each program class inside of the programs, in a map that I show in the beginning, then I loop over this, and then based on the program, I called all these other functions here. So that's kind of the thing, is because like the main, if it was another problem, I think I would have problems with these other functions as well. So but maybe not actually. Let me think about this. So the thing is this GL triangle here. It might be something else. But GL triangle is just a variable, so it might be the case that one of the variables works because whatever reason, maybe it's like is the same from GLFW or something like that. But then the other ones don't work because they have more functionality. Like they are functions, not variables. That might be the case. So I guess one thing that I can test is to see, and maybe I should go over the program class because I think I comment it out. Maybe not actually. Maybe it's not glad actually. Maybe it's something else. Oh no, I probably comment something else. And then how is this working? Interesting. I'm just realizing now that I'm still building the program here and it's still working. So the issue really is the functions, I think. Maybe it might be the way, it might be this uniform thing. Maybe it's not clads. Yeah, I think it's the uniform functions. Oh, I'm gonna talk about the functions from ImGui there, but now I'm thinking that the problem is probably these functions here. It might be the stuff that I was talking about. Like it compiles, but then because of the types, it fucks it up. So now the reason why I'm thinking about this is because I didn't realize last time that I'm still calling these functions here when I create the. So because the way that I'm doing when I create the program class, I call all the functions already to build everything. So one of the confusing parts is which was very annoying to simplify from the other project, or to try to simplify, is like the order that you call things seems to matter, I think. So like, you have the VBO, which is a vertex buffer object, which is a buffer that you're gonna send the data for the vertices. And you have a VAO, which is a vertex array object. And the vertex array object allows you to store the data from the VBO, so you don't have to set every time. But the thing is that the order that you set these things matter. And this is the part that is kind of confusing to me, that I'm not really sure. Because it seems like you have to set the array buffer, or set the vertex array object. Then right after that, you have to set all the functionality for how OpenGL is gonna get the data from the vertex buffers. And then after that, you have to unbind, but I'm not really sure if that's necessary or not. And the reason why it's confusing is because obviously you're gonna have multiple different classes, so it becomes kind of hard to think about like what exactly at what points I'm gonna be setting each thing and then unbinding each thing. But I think this way, if it doesn't work, then what I'm gonna do is just comment this out and then try to unbind all of them. Yeah, but now I realize that like the thing is, it could be this function here as well. So now I changed my mind completely. I thought that it was probably the glad because of the functions, but now I just realized that like I'm still calling the constructor, and the constructor is calling all these functions, so it can't be the glad thing. So the other thing that's so one of the main things that could be is this read shader file, because it's getting the path, which was one of the concerns that I have, and I spent a bunch of time thinking about this because it's kind of annoying because of the way CMake works as well. That The biggest part that I'm not unsure about this is the relative paths. The reason why I thought is working is because it's compiling, but obviously that's not guaranteed. So this could be one problem because of the way you have just I set up here, which I'm not really sure if it's the ways you're supposed to set things. I'm just copying the assets from the into the build directory, and then I'm using the relative path from the build directory to get to the shaders. So this could be one issue. So obviously the question is how to which I think is probably something that I'm gonna have to do now. So it's not worth it to try to continue to try to build. I think I have to figure this out. So like obviously the main thing is the biggest. I'm not really sure to be honest because like with anything it's very tricky to know what is the best approach, what is the best path to take. But the concern that the thing that's I have to figure out is segmentation, like how to deal with segmentation problems. So obviously I feel like I have to figure this out because it's something that is gonna happen all the time. But the issue that I have of figuring this out is that's gonna take a lot of time. So it might take a bunch of time, and then I could just solve this stuff and move on to the other things. But I think I can't really like delay this too much. Because I'm pretty sure I can. So like the solution to this is to create or figure out best way to print stuff. Because yeah, for both of these things, what I'm probably gonna have to do is create another project and then try to create a template of functions that I can use on all the other projects that I do. Which honestly I don't understand why it's not a thing yet. Why people... But it probably is, I just don't know, so... what I can do to solve is just test a bunch of things. No. But I think it's probably better to... I think I'm probably gonna focus on this thing here. Probably have to. So I'm gonna try some stuff now today, then probably tomorrow I'm gonna start working on... I'm gonna deviate, because this is the kind of the concern is like every time you face something, like you kind of have to deviate to other stuff, and then we might get lost into tangents instead of focusing on the actual thing. But I think that this is like probably something essential, so like I can't really get away from, because like what's gonna happen is that like, in order to avoid the thing, you're gonna face the thing like all the time, and then it would be much better off if you just solve it once really well, and then all the other times it's just gonna be a lot easier. And I know that this is something that's gonna happen all the time, so I have to figure this out. But the thing is, the biggest thing for me is that I wanna see if I can... Maybe there isn't a way, but I wanna see if I can find one approach that is the least reliable on IDEs, on any IDE, because I think that's... I don't like being dependent on one IDE to do things. So this is the problem with the approach of setting up the debugger on VS Code. Like it feels to me that it becomes too... At some point I might want to like switch to a new Vim, and then like I wasted all this time focusing on this, so I want to see if I can figure out a way to do it only on the command line. So but that's probably gonna relate or like understanding how GDB works under the hood, and that's kind of my concern, like GDB and CMake and all this stuff that I'm gonna spend a bunch of time trying to understand these projects instead of doing what I actually what I'm actually trying to do. Because I'm not really sure if I'm gonna stay with C++ as well. Like I might change the language at some point. The more experience that I have, so. Like, there's two big problems with C++ so far that I've experienced. The biggest one is by far the build system, but that's kind of the thing, is that obviously if you want something better, you have to do it. So I don't wanna, I'm not like complaining or shitting on the build system, is that I think that probably the other languages have better solutions. So is it like Rust is a lot easier to build things, but I'm not really sure. It might be a fundamental thing, like a fundamental problem. It's just a hard thing to do by nature, and that's the reason why it's like this. But I really don't like, on the higher level languages is much better because of that. Like, you don't have to think about this other stuff, and it feels like a waste of time. And like the thing that I feel the most is that like it's because it seems that it's always going to be the same thing, so I don't see the point of having to set this up all the time. It doesn't make sense to me. That's the thing. But it might be this way because it is very hard to deal with all the dependencies, and then like if I wanted to do use something better, I would have to do it myself. It's gonna take a bunch of time, and I don't want to do that. So obviously the other solution would be to change languages, but I'm not really sure if it's worth it or not. So, but it feels like a waste of time to have to like do this stuff each time. So the other solution is obviously to try to create a standard and like just sets, which was what I was trying to do in the beginning, but I'm not really sure if that's practical or not, or if it's like another thing that you deviate too much time from what I'm trying to do. So the other solution here seems to be probably the better solution, which is in between these things. Because of the other problem with C++ is that, at least that's how I feel. Obviously, I can be wrong about this, but from what I'm feeling so far, the intuition is that it feels like a lot of things are more complicated than they have to be. So it's like overcomplicated, just for the like it's complexity just for the sake of complexity. And that's the thing that I don't like it about. So for that reason, I imagine that like other people have felt the same way, and that's the reason why they created other languages. So there might be, I might be better off switching to other languages and just using them. But if I'm gonna do that, I'm just gonna do that after I build this stuff, obviously, because I don't wanna like keep passing to later. So I wanna build the thing first, and based on the thing that I'm trying to build, hopefully I'm gonna be able to use that to learn faster everything else. So it's gonna like creates a virtual cycle. So I think that probably for now the best thing to do is focus on this thing here. I think I can get by just by, I have to figure out a standard way that I can print everything. I put checkpoints with printing statements. So yeah. So figure out best way to print common. And then I can create a library, I think. Yeah, that's probably the best thing to do. So I just figure out what is the best way to print the common data structures, then put all of them in a function. In functions, put them on the header file, and then just name that print or something like that. And then I can use on all the projects. I think that's what I'm going to focus on, probably. But for now, I'm going to try to see if I can solve this other problem. So it could be the relative path from the read shader file, and it could be the, I guess I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. Could be these variables here, because this is undefined, so it fucks up the thing. But I think, and maybe that's not an issue if you, And maybe it's only an issue when you send the data, but like when you try to set the actual value. So the first thing that I have to do is just comment out the set functions. But I don't think I have to I have to see which functions that I'm actually using, and then based on that, I try to think about what can be wrong. And the other thing that is interesting though is that when I uncomment here, it fucks it up. But this might be because I'm including twice. I'm not really sure. Because this one was including as well. Yeah, this is including glad. So the question is why. Maybe what I can do is just it's probably better to do that. So create another file, call it glad, and then that's what I'm gonna do now. So just yeah, but I'm doing that. No, but it has to be for glad. So only includes once in the project. Oh, but it has to be. No, I think that's fine. I think this is gonna solve the other one. Oh, this. I'm just curious to see if this is gonna solve the glad error. Because now obviously I'm putting the thing that only is gonna only import the file once throughout the project. And this might be the reason why I was getting the segmentation faults on the other one, because of the context. It creates two different contexts, but I'm not really sure. Regardless of whether or not I solve the issue with other stuff, I think I have to understand more how the thing is that I'm watching these videos here from Handmade Hero, which are very helpful. So I think I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna watch all these videos first before because he's explaining from the ground up, like without using any libraries, how to create games. So that's the reason why I wasn't studying still OpenGL context, because he's probably gonna talk about it soon, and I kind of already understand somewhat. But I think even after watching all these videos, I'm probably gonna study more, true. And also the Windows API to understand how it works. Still some problems. Oh, I think it is. Yeah, I just realized now. It might be the. That's kind of weird though. Because I was gonna say that it might be because this is the only what, like this is the only file that I'm including on the main thing. So that's the reason why I comment out here. But then the question is like, how does it compile? It can't be, the problem can't be GLAD, I think. But it has to be related, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. Because now I think I'm only importing or including it once. So if I'm including it once, like how is, what is going on? And if the issue is GLAD, then how does it compile when when I'm importing on? Oh, I'm not importing here anymore. Yes, here. Oh no, this is the problems. Right here. And so I don't really understand. I think the only explanation has to be because like this is the file that I'm including here directly. But then, oh, I think I understand now because I'm only including, but so it has to be the build process, I think, the answer. Because I'm still including the GLAD here and it's not failing. So yeah, obviously what I can try is just include on another file on the project. I think the problem is the build process. Like, because I'm exposing I'm importing or including this file here on the main one, and the main one is the one that uses the GLFW. So it might be might be a conflict with context between the functions from GLFW and my thing, but when I use GLAD on the other files, then that doesn't happen because of the way that the build process works, because it builds the project first and then links. But this might be the reason why why I'm getting the error, because even though it links, there's still the error underneath. But it would be that doesn't make sense because yeah, the other way it works. So actually I have to try other stuff. So first I'm gonna try to include this on another file here. I'm gonna comment this one out, then include. I already did here. I think this is gonna tell me whether or not the problem is that I'm including twice. I think it's probably because I'm including on the graphics, and then I'm including the graphics on the main. No, still fucking up. But no, so it has to be because I'm including twice somehow, even if I have these things there on the. now it works. So I don't understand why this isn't protecting from including several times. This is kind of the thing that I don't like about this, but I'm not really sure why it works this way. Because obviously then it becomes a pain in the ass if you want to use the header multiple times. So like one solution that I'm thinking about if you want to use is figure out how to do a global include and then expose the library to the whole thing, but I'm not really sure why this isn't working either. So yeah, other thing that I have to see. Yeah, but the problem is like, for testing this, it doesn't work because I have to comment out everything. So that's the issue. But I think the problem is it should be because I'm including this twice. So the next thing that I want to try, so I'm going to think about this later. I'm going to try first to comment out the functions, or to uncomment the functions that set the uniforms to see if it's going to give us segmentation faults, which I think is probably going to be the case. And it's probably going to be because of the types. So one thing that I can try is just to see if I can convert one type, because I'm going to have to receive the types from the main rendering cycle, so I have to convert those types into the types that the OpenGL functions want. I have to see. I'm probably gonna try to use it dynamic cast or static cast. The problem with this is that I'm not really sure what you search for. Like how to figure this out. So obviously the first question will be why putting the headers. As the other thing that I can try is this fragmenting first. But I think it's not gonna do anything. So either I have to figure out how to make this one work, or figure out how to do global includes. Yeah, but I don't think that's a big problem. I think it's gonna be easier to solve than I was thinking about, because I was thinking that I would have to rebuild all this stuff here, but now I'm thinking that all I have to do is figure out the global imports or the global include for the glad thing, and then I have to change the uniform functions. It's probably a segmentation fault because of the uniform functions. But the main thing that I'm gonna have to do is spend time thinking about this thing here. The main question is what is the best way to solve segmentation fault problems. So I'm probably gonna stop developing this for some time until I figure this out. I think that's probably the smartest thing to do. Which kind of sucks, but I think I'm gonna try to get to the point where I'm rendering things first. I want to get to the point at least that I have the same version of SOTVs but with C++ now. Once I get to that point, then I think I can stop and think about the segmentation fault thing. But the way that ImGui works is pretty much calling this function here, and I think that's the function that initializes the context. So it does the bridge between OpenGL and ImGui, and what this function does is just calls some Windows functions. I think it's this one to get the OpenGL context. I think that's what's happening, and then this file here uses the other, which is uses this thing here. I think. And this is the file. No, it's not this one. I think it's, yeah, it's this one actually. So this is the file. Oh, this has some of them. I think it's another one. I'm sure. I think it's the file that I was just looking at. Oh, this is for Windows. But there is a file that they put a bunch of functions. Use this one. No. This one, the loader. So this file, they specify a bunch of functions and variables from OpenGL. And I think they use this one in conjunction with the other one. Sure. So they get the OpenGL context using Windows, some Windows functions, and then they set up these other ones, something like that. And this just saves these names here on this struct. Obviously, I still don't understand very well because I didn't study very in depth. So what I'm gonna try is just to, I'm gonna see if I can solve this first. So it must be the uniform functions. So I'm gonna try to solve. The main thing is to convert the types that I'm receiving on these functions to the types that, whatever types that they accept. I think that's the first thing you should try. So I'm gonna try to solve this, then after I solve this, I'm going to think about what is the best thing to do. If it is to, because I imagine at some point, maybe not actually. Because I don't know, I don't think I'm gonna develop that much more on this. The final thing to do on this project here is to just add a bunch of other functions to set the uniforms. The only other thing would be the buffer, but I'm not really sure if, yeah, like I can delay that a lot, so like maybe it's better to, because this is not the main thing that I'm trying to do. So Or maybe it's better to just get to the point where I can build the graph visualizations and then I can start focusing on the other stuff. Then after I have everything, then I come back and try to figure this out. But I think this one I have to figure out probably very soon. And that's probably the thing that I should do right after. Depending on how hard it's gonna be to solve this thing here. And then maybe, but I'm not really sure. I think I'm gonna have to figure this out as well. Probably this, but not why it isn't working there. I think I don't need to figure that out. No, it would be good to know, obviously, but then it's a trade-off on time. But I think this thing here I have to. This one is probably not very hard to figure out. So, but I'm gonna try to solve this first. If it takes a long time, then I'm just gonna change and then start trying to figure this out, and then trying to figure this out as well. So the first one that I'm gonna uncomment is the one instead of this, which sets the projection. The way that they were caching on the render some projection matrix, but I'm not really sure if it's necessary or not. So the way that I'm trying to do now is just set the projection matrix value once, which is the matrix that holds the values that are gonna translate into 3D coordinates. The positions of the camera and the object is just gonna multiply everything by that, and then it's gonna, based on the multiplication, it's gonna get the values for the 3D stuff. So like this matrix never changes unless you change which camera you're using. So I think I can set only once, and the other ones I think you have to set. The other ones you have to set on every time on the rendering cycle, because it's gonna be the positions of each thing. But that's kind of another thing that I'm uncertain because, and it's hard to think about because the main thing is the color now. Because the way that you set the values on the mesh class are gonna change the positions of everything, but I think that they change kind of like by proxy, not directly. They don't change the values on the shader. They just change the values on the classes themselves, on the object 3D classes, which are these matrices here. And then based on these values, it changes the position because of the calculation, because you're using these matrices. So I have to set the matrices every time, but I don't think you need to set the position or do anything. And I'm not really sure if the color is the same way. That's the thing. Like maybe when I change the color on the mesh, because the color is changed on the material, I think. I'm not really sure though. I don't remember really well how I was doing on the other one. But I think you set the color on the material, and that's kind of the thing. But it shouldn't be that hard anyway, because all I have to do is put the functionality, create functionality that is gonna check to see the value of the material from the mesh, and then you just set the value on the shader. So it shouldn't be that hard, I think. So now it's probably gonna fail. So it has to be because of this thing here. But maybe not. Maybe it was because I was importing twice. And now it works. I don't remember really well. I don't remember if I had the include here when I tested the first time. Oh, so it works. Oh. Interesting. So it's not the functions either. It's just because I had the... so now... Yeah, but obviously it's not showing anything there. That's the thing. But I think it's because of the color. So I guess what I can do is just ask ChatGPT, how can I put default colors? If it isn't that, then it's probably something else. Then that's the issue. I think it's not. It shouldn't be the relative path because then you wouldn't be running, I think. But I have to verify this as well, so probably gonna how to know if the file. But the functions that I have there, they already check for this, I think. But they check if the shader was built successfully, not if they. So I have to clarify this, I think. So this function here. There is this checks here. Oh, that isn't the function that checks. Is the. I think I didn't put the check on this one. I put the check on the buffer. On this function here, or the other one. I think it's to build the program that there is a check somewhere. Check compilation errors when creating the shader. So probably this function should throw an error if the build's not successful. But the thing is, I don't know if it guarantees that the string that you received is correct. But it kind of has to be, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to build the objects. So I'm not really sure now. So the question is, how does OpenGL? But this is kind of the problem, and the thing that I was talking about before, where I think that it might be better to use Vulkan now, because like you don't have access to the functions anyway. So, and I think that's the reason why, because the main question is obviously like, how do these functions work? I'm pretty sure you don't, because you're just gonna go to the interface, which is either GL or whatever file you're using to create the function pointers, to go to the actual definition. So you don't have actually access to the source code for these functions. So this is kind of the issue. I don't think you can like know, but what I imagine what is happening is just they receive the string and then they're gonna have a compiler which just processes the string, obviously, then gets the tokens, creates the abstract syntax tree, intermediate representation, and then create the code. So I imagine that this is the process that they do on these functions. So if that's correct, then it means that if the string was incorrect, then it would throw an error, or if it wasn't, if it didn't have anything. So I think for that reason, probably is unlikely that this is an issue. So the other thing that can be is obviously the buffers, the way that I'm setting up the buffers, and I think the most obvious thing is the color. So that's what I'm gonna try. But if it isn't the color, then it might be very annoying, because I'm not really sure how long. It can take a very long time to figure out what is on. But if it does take a long time, then I'm just gonna switch to. I'm probably gonna switch to this anyway. So I have to spend time figuring out, even though it's very annoying, what is the best way. So probably, I think I'm gonna start off with this thing here. So probably next string that I do, I'm just gonna do this part here. So create another project, then create one header file, and then put a bunch of functions that print different data types. So like, I have a similar way of printing stuff in the same way that I did on Python and JavaScript, so I don't have to think about this stuff anymore. Then the other thing that I'm going to spend time doing is trying to see what is the best way to figure out segmentation fault problems without having to use any debugger or stuff like that. Like, from first principles fundamental perspective, maybe I'm going to have, I'm not really sure if this one is going to be worth it, because it's probably going to involve having to read or find the source code for GDB and then trying to understand what is going on. But it might be worth it, because I'm gonna learn a lot. That's the thing. Because from some videos that I've seen, also people, they get a different thing that I'm getting there. So, but it might be because I was getting, but this is kind of the issue. Like, if it is because I was getting segmentation fault, then it's kind of pointless, because then obviously, like, I can't use it. So this is the thing, is that for me, I get this thread and the numbers, which are probably memory addresses or something like that. But for other people, I've seen that they get the actual names of things. So it might be because of this. Might be because of this, and this might be because of the. I don't think it is now because of the segmentation fault, because I'm still getting. But yeah, this is the thing. It just shows new thread, and then it doesn't show any information about what is going on actually. But the question is like how to. And from some videos I've seen, I think that it does show. So it might be some GDB configuration that I have. But I'm not really sure how long it's gonna take to figure all of this out, and it might be a waste of time. But I think starting to try to understand is probably worth it. So first figure out the print stuff, then focus on the, then spend a bunch of time studying the segmentation faults thing or the GDB, how GDB works under the hood, not just the commands, and why it's showing the threads here and not other information. But this part is probably it's not gonna be worth it. I think it's just gonna be too much. Like I'm better off trying to build the stuff that I'm building, so I can use that stuff to learn everything, I think. I'm gonna have to put the whole thing, I think. Interesting that now it's not showing the warning that was showing before. This warning here. Hmm. The other thing that I didn't do, and I'm probably gonna have to. I'm still not showing anything. So it's probably a problem with the way that I'm setting. But now it's kind of annoying because I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what is wrong. So it could be the. I don't think it's the way that I'm setting the camera though. It's unlikely that it's anything related to the classes because the classes are done on the other project and they're just from 3JS, so it's probably the correct way to set. So I guess I can change the value. The easiest thing to do is change the values of the camera, you see. But the main thing that's it's gonna be annoying if it is the buffers. If it's something related to the buffer setup, I guess I can try that as well. Well, I think that this is less bad than if it was the GLAD thing, because it will probably take a lot more time to understand the GLAD stuff. Which I don't think I'm gonna do now. I think I'm just gonna try to figure out. I'm gonna do these things here. Maybe it's because I'm not setting, but it wouldn't matter because They have default values. Hmm. Maybe changing the version, but I don't think that would change anything. So what I can do is just try to set the value. So let me think. Honestly, I think I'm gonna do this off stream. So probably what I'm gonna do. So I have to test a bunch of different stuff. That's the thing. But what I'm gonna do now is just try to test to see if I set the values. So I have to first get the type that's from here, which is vector3 and floats. Then based on this, I have to create the other functions, which I'm just gonna copy from the other one to overload the type. I'll create a different function for each type. Then I'm gonna try to set the color from the mesh, but I think that's not gonna work. I guess the last thing that I can try is just change the values of the camera. I think I'm gonna change the title of the stream as well, because I spend a bunch of time doing things that are not related to explaining this stuff here. Oh, maybe it's because I forgot that Huh. So... Yeah, but now I'm not sure if it's gonna work or not. I completely forgot that I commented this off. Yeah, but now it's an issue because I'm not gonna know. Like if it breaks, I'm not gonna know if it's because of the other stuff. Actually, if it breaks, if it does a segmentation fault, I'm gonna know. But I think it should be, like, it's still importing GLAD, but maybe it's... Yes. But maybe it breaks because, like, even though I'm including it's linking everything, it's not running, so it might be the case. I think that might be the problem, actually. So that's the reason. No, man, sorry. Interesting. You share your file. Oh, so now... Huh. Honestly, I don't know what to make of this anymore. So I think that I was getting, like, the initial issue of the segmentation fault was because of GLAD, probably, because I was including twice. And now it's probably the file, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, I am from Brazil. Oh, thank you, man. Hi, true. How do you do it? Yeah, I was building a Chrome extension. I trying to build, but no. You were the person that talked to me as I was trying to build it. If it was you, then I remember. So obviously what I can do is just to do this. Oh, but I should be glad. And see if I'm gonna get segmentation faults. Because now I'm confused. I think the initial issue, there's two different issues, I think. So I think that if I fix, it's probably The problem is probably the path, the file path. So it's the thing about shaders. I hope. If it isn't, then it's gonna be annoying. As I talk to you, I might have changed my name. Yeah, so you probably changed your username, I think. But it's very hard to remember anyone. In the very beginning, obviously I did, but now, like, I don't know. Use another account, but I stay here for a while. It's actually completely okay to do so long as you initialize it once. You can then use the GL functions throughout the code. Yeah, but the thing that I'm trying to do is create another header file here. And then I use guard, however you say this, the name of this thing here. And then I imported that file, but it's still, I was getting the issue, and I don't understand why. So I think I did unique glad here. And then I just did it like this. Obviously I changed the name of the thing here. But I was still, like, even if I do this, which in my mind would make it so that I only include once, I still get the error. That's the thing. I don't know anything about coding. Not true. You should learn, man. Or woman, or whatever you are. No, it's trying to build one of those games that people post on TikTok where a ball bounces inside a circle. Gets bigger each bounce and plays one note from music. But then I give up. No, man, you have to start with something simple. Otherwise, you're just gonna get discouraged. Like, it's kind of like if you never went to the gym and then you try to deadlift 500 pounds and then you can't do it and then you quit, like, it doesn't make sense. But obviously I understand because, like, and this is one of the frustrating things because it takes a long time and there's a bunch of things you have to learn until you get to the point where you can actually see something on the screen. It's kind of annoying. So I completely understand that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, start from the very basics and pick something very easy to do. And then watch, like, if you feel the strategy that I did in the beginning, and I think that is like the best, is you try to build something, then you're probably gonna fail, and then you just go on tutorial hell for a little bit. So, like, watch a bunch of videos of people talking about the concepts and stuff like that. Like, whenever you don't feel like going hard and trying, and then after some time you try again, and then just keep doing that until you get it. And there is no other solution, right? So, but I think that's, I'm not really sure though if anyone, it's kind of hard to know. But from my perspective, I think, like, I can only speak for myself, obviously, but I don't know what other people should do. But for myself, the way that I think, like, you don't have a choice. So that's how I think in my mind. Like, everything is gonna become code eventually. If we survive artificial intelligence, everything is gonna be integrated with code, and it's kind of like it's very similar to understanding physics or anything like that. Like, you don't really have a choice. So you do, but then you don't understand how reality works. So that's, I don't know. For me, I want to understand. So. It is very frustrating though. I understand that. In the beginning, it was very painful to, like, the most frustrating thing is that, like, the stuff that you take it for granted when you, like, as a user, when you're using things, like, you look at a website and you think, oh, okay, that's, like, I see that stuff every day, but you don't realize how hard it is to do the simple things. And that's the frustrating part, because in your mind you have this high expectation that you should build, like, everything at once without doing any work, but then you try to do it, and then, like, just to put a simple square on the screen is, like, extremely fucking hard. So I don't lift that much, man. I just look big, but I'm not very. And genetically, I think I'm more like, my genetics is more for looking big than for being strong. So I'm not that strong. And I used to deadlift way before, but then it kind of was fucking up my back, so I stopped doing that. Can you have Many different factors avoids external including headers, but only source files to make sure they stick to a single compilation unit. Hmm. Including headers. Oh, interesting. I thought that it was better to include on the header, but obviously I don't know for sure. Oh, no, no worries. The conclusion that I got from this, like, I'm not gonna focus on this right now. I'm going to try to see like how to do a global include, but I think I'm gonna focus on the other stuff first. Then there's too many things happening, so uh, I'm probably not gonna try to solve this or think about this. I'm gonna focus on the other stuff first, unless I have to. Then obviously, are not concerned that you're here learning code right now all day. And no code tools are getting so much better. No, because that gets into nihilism at the bottom of this. Like anything you do is useless. So it's kind of a paradoxical thing because I, obviously I don't know this for sure. Like I haven't mastered this, but I think that the only thing that makes sense is to embrace whatever is happening on the present. And any goal you have is useless because it doesn't matter if you achieve something or not, you're always going to be disappointed because whatever you achieve and whatever you acquire is going to become a dependency for you. So it's going to raise the bar of your life, and then you're going to become attached to that, and that's going to create suffering. So suffering is happiness because the contrast is the experience. So they are divided by time. So it doesn't matter anything you do in life because everything is going to be lost. So but from that perspective, you're at the same time you don't want to die because you're a biological organism and you have these desires. So you want sex, you want good relationships, you want a house, food, water, the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So life forces you to do this stuff. So it's more coming from the paradoxical point of view that you're chasing things, being aware that they don't matter. So and regardless of whether or not AI takes over, you're always going to have to put challenges for yourself, and that's what video games are, for example. So I do believe that's better to, it's possible to create a better reality, but at the at the exact same time, it isn't because it's all like reality is already perfection. So any attempt to try to create something better is just your delusional way of thinking because you lack the complexity of the infinite potential to see the connection of how good things become bad things over time. No, I don't use. I try not to use social media. The only thing that I spend a bunch of time on is probably Twitch. Twitch sometimes and YouTube watching videos, but I try not to stay on social media. Avoid including GLAD on headers. Okay. So if I include them on the CPP files, I guess I can try that. I can include on two different ones, and then see. But here was failing. So yeah, but I guess I can try on here and then on the other one. How can I go to? Interesting. But now I commented it out, so it makes sense. But I think I'm still gonna get the segmentation files if I do like this. I had some of these errors before, but it's just because of the IDE. I'm not really sure what. I think it's just the settings of the CPSB, but it's not. Maybe it is, but I'm gonna try to run first. So it is. Interesting. So I guess this is what I have to do, but I'm not sure if that's gonna work. So I have to create one file, one header file, then put GLAD there, and just include that file on the CPP files that require GLAD, instead of putting GLAD on the header file. That makes sense. I think that's the problem. I was trying to create. That's the why the guard thing is not working. Let me see. Yeah, but what if I need the functions on the header? That's the problem. Yeah, but I guess I can. I don't think that's gonna solve. I was thinking about creating this one and then just including this one on the CPP files, but now I realize that like I might need to put OpenGL functions on a header file. But maybe I should leave it like this. So I'm gonna try to import this one on, or include this one on two different headers, on two different C++ files. Let's see if it breaks. Yeah, I can, sometime. What do they post? I wanna be careful with social media because I think that is not a problem with social media. It's just the way that human beings are. So I think that's on social media specifically, it increases the chances that you're gonna become more polarized and become more. I don't know. It just like it feels like a negative downward spiral where everyone is constantly like, because most people don't have the awareness over their shadow. They they are their more authentic self on social media, but they're not wise enough to, or have enough empathy to, because it's also harder to have empathy when you're not physically seeing people. So that creates a process where everyone polarizes more and more, and then it goes like in a negative spiral where it's like shaping your mind. That's what I noticed for myself. And then on top of that, the worst is obviously TikTok and Instagram, because they hijack your limbic system, which is your like animal self, and then it's kind of like a drug where you become more and more zombified the more time you spend on the platforms, because they are decreasing the attention span you have and how much critical thinking you have. And it's like a dirty high because you don't really like it that much, but you still do it because it's just you're addicted to it. It's just dopamine. So yeah. But I think that is a systematic, like, the problem is that it's very hard to, because you have competitive forces, like the market is a human being force, a human being problem. So, which is a lot more complicated. Yeah, it is. So, and that's like, I hate that YouTube, but that's the thing, because like YouTube is pushing shorts now, but it's kind of the same thing, because like you can't really get away from it, because the problem is that people are gonna do it. Like that's what people want. But the reason why people want that is because most people are drug addicts. Actually, everyone's a drug addict, whether they know it or not, because we are all designed to be drug addicts, pretty much, because of the way, because of natural selection. So this is the kind of the issue. And I think that this is the biggest problem with the market economy. That's the thing. Is like because the market economy, if you think about it, is always relative to the network that creates the market economy. So it's not so much the problem of the market economy, because I think it's grounded on reproduction, which is a fundamental part of physics. So like it does have some degree of truth, but it isn't. The problem with humans is that we're not aligned on the frequency, because the nature of our desires don't change depending on the environment. They're always the same. So when the environment changes, we overfit the environment pretty much. So depending on the environment that natural selection shaped human nature, we're going to be attached to that, and that's going to be byproduct of gravity that I think is related to the genetics. So because of that, the systems we have are going to reinforce this behavior, because it doesn't matter. Like if you're the social media that doesn't push this stuff, it doesn't naturally polarize, then what's going to happen is that you're going to get out-competed, because the companies that do that are going to get more money, because they're capturing more people by turning them into drug addicts. So it's kind of it's hard to think about. And the fundamental issue is that it's a lot easier to put metrics on things that are not valuable, because value by itself is the gradient between the prices. So the fluctuation of prices through infinity is what the intrinsic value of something is in relationship to other things, because value is always relative to the observer. So over an infinite span of time in relationship to an observer, which is also changing, the variations of the prices are going to determine what the value of the thing is for that thing. So it's always relative. So because of that, the nature of the value is irreducible computationally. So it's a lot more challenging to put metrics on things that are valuable, because by definition it's hard to measure, because it's qualitative, not quantitative, and obviously is on a gradient. So like the challenge is, how do you create a social media that optimizes for the best, most balanced and harmonized system? And it's very hard, because it's not easy and not straightforward to put metrics on what is meaningful for people. It's a lot easier to put metrics on what spikes dopamine and other chemicals that are going to make people become more engaged on the thing. So yeah, I think I'm not gonna do it right now. I will do it later though. I'm gonna write here. I think I'm gonna watch it on. I'm gonna see if I can find it on YouTube. And it depends on the kind of, because of the stuff that I was saying. I wanna try my best to avoid watching short content so that I don't poison my mind. So interesting as well. Obviously, I don't judge either. Like, because I want to avoid getting into the trap as well. That's like I'm above these things, but because yeah, I think everyone is a drug addict. Like you're lying to yourself if you think you're not. So the people that are not drug addicts are the ones that have awareness of how much of a drug addict they are, so they can stop themselves from engaging the thing. And it's always a battle, because everyone's always changing constantly. So. No, man, I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate the offer, though. Thank you. Yeah, I tried that, but it doesn't work. I'm not really sure what's going on now. I say no such file directory. I think it's because of the place. Yeah, I put on the wrong place probably, this file. The unique LAD file. Maybe not. No, it should be here. Oh, did I remove the? No, because yeah, I copied GLAD. I downloaded GLAD with the source, C source, because I thought that this might be the reason why it wasn't working, because I had the version only header, the only header version. So I downloaded the whole thing, and then I put on a separate folder from the includes, but I added this on CMake here, so it should be the correct path, I think. And this other one is on this one. So I think it should work. Oh, it's because of this. It's because of this. I didn't change this. This is not the biggest issue though. That's the thing. At least for now. The biggest issue is try to understand why it's not loading there. But I think it's probably because of the error that I got. It might be because of this. The read shader file thing. Which is another annoying thing. It's like how to figure out or how to set up the shaders in the correct way using CMake. It's hard to find documentation because obviously it depends on the what you're trying to do. And because I have like the situation that I have is kind of like it's not easy to find stuff related to the same situation I have. So I'm trying to build the library, which is a subdirectory from the other project, and then I'm linking this library with the other project. And yeah, I include the other CMake with this command, and this command is gonna run the code that I have here. Then I set all the CPP files here, and I create this command, and I link the sources, and I'm including with this. And this is the command I was using to set the assets folder to the build directory. But I think that's probably the issue, that I can't use the relative path to do it like that. Or I have to do it in another way to copy. This I think I got from another project, this version here. Yeah, from the OpenGL tutorials, the examples. But this is like very complicated, so I wanna avoid, which is the whole thing that I was talking about CMake, the reason I don't like that much. It's like C++ in general is like, it seems like overcomplicated, but the thing is, I don't like, I wasn't like planning to say that, but I don't like saying these things because obviously, like, it makes no sense to complain if you're not gonna do better, so. So I'm not trying to complain. I think it sucks, but I wouldn't be able to do it better, so. It's just that other languages might have better systems, so it might be better to use them instead of C++. Because it feels like a pain in the ass to deal with the headers and the build process. It slows you down a lot. But then obviously C++, the positive side is that it's very fast, I think. It's probably the fastest, so. I think I'm gonna stop streaming now. I'm already tired and there's too much going on. Like there's a lot of things that I have to think about. So I'm gonna stop now and I'm going to spend some time thinking about what is the best way, what is the best approach to go. What I know for sure is that I'm not gonna solve this GLAD thing now. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get to the way that I was doing, like only importing or only including GLAD once, and then trying to solve the other issue first, which I think is more important, so I can see the stuff that I'm drawing. Once I get to the point, then I think, like, because this is the thing that I'm most not concerned about, but it's because the project is so big and I like spend so much time trying to simplify everything. So like the main priority is to make sure that the code that I have there is working the way that's supposed to be. Then I can focus on the other stuff, I think. So the most important thing is get to the point where I'm getting there or there about the shader, and that's what I'm gonna try to do. My engine looking for music when I got to recommend this stream. I've been through most of these issues you're having over the past 3 years. Right, with context, I can help you find the right direction. Yeah, I have send me a message on Twitter. I used to, I had a Discord group in the past, but like I don't know. I think Twitter is better probably. And then like if you send me a message on Twitter, then I can send you the Discord is kind of weird because I don't. Maybe I can show you here, or you can send me message on Discord directly. But the thing is that they changed the way that they do the names at some point, and now I'm never really sure like what name to send to people. But yeah, so Twitter is probably better to send a message than I send you stuff on. Uh, and obviously, I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to. Right now, I think like it's not a problem to like talk to people on Discord, but I imagine that at some point, like I want to be very careful with the time, obviously, because time is very valuable, and I have a lot of stuff to do. So if a lot of people start asking me to talk, then I'm gonna have to say no. So yeah, yeah. But this is the my name here. It's Flow, and the username I think is VMS Code. Yeah, I also like Discord. It's also better to like have discussions or like on these voice channels and like have calls. I think it's better than Zoom and other stuff. But I think the reason why I stopped sending invites to this thing is just because I thought that the biggest issue with Discord is that there's a lot of noise and you end up not seeing anything. That's kind of the biggest problem. And I think that's yeah, it feels like if it's I don't spend any time on Discord now. Open once a day probably, then look to see if there's anything, and then I don't spend any time reading anything because it's too much noise, I think. But it's another thing that is one of those things that's very hard to figure out. So, but I will accept your thing. So yeah, next stream I'm probably gonna focus on this. I'm gonna deviate from what I'm doing to try to become better at dealing with these segmentation faults and this other stuff, and solving the issue that I'm having here. So